Good morning, everyone. Hi, Tracy.
Hey, Megan.
Just letting people filter into the room here, and we can get going soon. Tracy, can you see the agenda?
I can.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks for zooming it in so that I can read it with my old eyes.
Same. Pretty standard agenda. For those who are familiar, hi Cindy, with our structure, typically we have a joint flood and water availability meeting in March. We're going to stick with the standard agenda this week, and there were some updates, if you're curious, from Kevin Houck and his team provided at the CWSB board meeting last week, and that is posted online. So let me see. I think we've got Becky Bollinger in here, and perhaps I don't see NRCS in here yet, but we can get started. I don't have any major updates. Tracy, do you have anything from DWR?
No, I don't.
Okay. Becky, are you ready to go? Because we can jump in pretty quickly here.
Give me just a second.
Sure, take your time. That's not a problem. We still have people joining. And for those who don't know, this will be my last water availability task force meeting as a state employee. I might just listen in as a public member moving forward, because I, am curious about these topics and things and would like to stay involved. But my last day at CWSB is next week, March 30th. So this is a kind of a goodbye for those folks on the call that I've met over the last few years. Who's crying laughing? What? I don't know where that emoji came from.
We just give Megan a big round of applause for all of the amazing Drought and WATF.
For sure. Thanks.
So it's really been a pleasure. I'm sure I speak for many of us on this call.
Thanks. All right, I'm going to stop sharing this agenda. And now I can see faces. Hello, people. And I'm going to mute myself and hand it over to Becky.
Does that look okay?
Looks great.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Typical fashion, I'm finishing up in the final seconds. So I always feel a little bit discombobulated, but let's get to it. So in this latest climate update, I'm going to kind of give a winter status, where we ended the winter, considering the December, January, February time period, where we currently stand, and maybe see what the rest of spring and possibly summer are going to bring us. So first, let's do the water year to date, and specifically the winter, to see where we are. This is a map or a plot showing for the entire state of Colorado average precipitation for the December, January, February time period. So the dashed line shows the 1991 to 2020 average. Statewide average is 3.22 inches, and we were slightly wetter than that average, just a little bit, coming in at the 50th wettest winter in the 128-year record, according to NOAA records. When we look at a rank of this on the top left corner for the map, you can see that we're really just hovering in that average area, although all of the states surrounding us have been a bit drier for that winter time period. Breaking it down by month, February was also near average, coming out as the 46th driest. And then that month by month breakdown on the right table there shows what we've seen for the state since the beginning of the water year in October. So November really sticks out as being and extremely dry. December surprisingly pops out as being very wet, and that was mostly due to precipitation that fell in the mountains. We know that east of the divide, we weren't really getting that much. And it's been kind of quiet since then. So this is breaking it down across the state, looking at those 3 months for the winter time period. And this looks at a rank, taking those 100 and, this says 127 years. I think it's 128, maybe it's 127. But looking at the December, January, February compared to all the December, January, Februaries in that data set. And if it's ranked in a wetter category, so 35th wettest or higher, it gets that greenish color. And if it's ranked drier, from 35th driest to drier, it gets in that brownish shading. And so we can see that the northern Front Range, those northern mountain areas, and our Front Range urban communities around Denver and to the north have been quite wet for the winter, and that was mostly due to what occurred in January and February, not during December. And then across the rest of the state, we've got a couple of dry pockets, a couple of little bit wetter pockets, but really just kind of close to normal and typical for what we expect for precipitation during the winter. Switching over to temperature, now statewide average temperature, the mean line for 1991 to 2020 is in the gray dash line there. And we were also slightly, very slightly warmer than that average. As you can see from that average though, that it's pretty high when you compare it to the entire historical range. So it comes out pretty warm when we look at the entire history, even though it's only slightly warmer than the 1991 to 2020 average. A lot of that warmth is really due to what happened in December. So the temperature ranks for all the states for the winter show up in the upper left corner. And you can see that what Colorado experienced was pretty similar to what all the surrounding states experienced. In the lower left corner is what our rank was for February. And we had a cool February. It was 30th coolest February in the record. And that is our 4th February in a row that's been in the cooler rank, which is a pretty interesting statistic, I think. When we look at the month by month breakdown table on the right, we see that aside from February, every month for the water year has been warmer, especially when we look at November and December. So this cool February, even if we don't like the cold temperatures sometimes, I don't, it is a nice relief from what we were experiencing at the beginning of winter. And here's what those winter temperatures look like when you break it down throughout the state. So again, if you are in that warmer category, so 35th warmest or higher, you will see that red shading. We don't have any blue shading anywhere. So despite a cooler February, that doesn't show up for the entire winter. And if you go into the southwestern corner of the state and the San Juan Mountains, that's where we saw some of the warmest anomalies. So let's look at where we are currently standing. This is what precipitation has fallen since the beginning of March. If you see oranges, the yellowish oranges, those are areas that have received less than 1/4 of an inch. So focusing in on the southeastern corner of the state, particularly in Baca County, a couple of locations in the San Luis Valley, and then just there near the Four Corners. Most other areas have received over 1/2 inch of moisture since the beginning of the month. Those darker greens that we see across the Denver metro area and extending onto the eastern plains from there throughout much of the mountains have gotten more than 1 inch. And then the blue areas have gotten more than 2 inches. So it has been a pretty active month precipitation wise. And to go with it, March has also been cooler. So this is looking at the entire month to date for March. What have those cool anomalies looked like? And the green shows that most locations around the state have been at least 2 degrees below average for the month. And then where you see those blues, you're getting even colder. And you see there North Park and down into the Grand Valley, and then over into the Yampa Valley have been even colder. So we're going to switch and look at the Standardized Precipitation Index. The Standardized Precipitation Index shows, it standardizes the precipitation so that we can see how anomalously wet or dry a location is for the time scale and the time period that we are looking at. In this example, we're looking at year to date. So comparing January 1st through March 20th, for all those stations and how that compares to January 1st through March 20th in the historical record for those stations. The drought categories are the yellow, orange, red, and maroon, and those line up with the US Drought Monitor categories for how anomalously dry it is. And then on the flip side, those green, blues, and purples show anomalously wet SPIs. And so when we extend back to January 1st, what we see is a very clear divide with the Continental Divide, where most of our drier SPIs are showing up west of the Continental Divide and the wetter categories are showing up east of the Continental Divide. Where you see a gray dot is really in that near normal range for precipitation for that time period. This is extending back a water year to date, so back to October 1st, and we see a little bit of a different pattern, a lot of near normal range SPIs showing up in the northern mountains, a little bit wetter when we get along the I-70 corridor and a little bit to the south. And then we've got some drier categories in the San Juan Mountains and across the Eastern Plains. The 9-month SPI extends back into late June, so you're capturing some of that summer, and we can see that on the Eastern Plains and in the San Luis Valley, that's where we capture some of that dryness, also showing up in the Northern Front Range, but we're also capturing some of the wetness that we experienced from the monsoon in the higher elevations. That disappears a little bit when we extend to the 12-month and we start to see a couple of isolated locations of wetter, but mostly drier SPIs popping up throughout. And then a reminder that we are in some long-term drought conditions. And when we extend out to that 2-year time period, that's when we really start to see some of that dryness pop out. In terms of soil moisture, the map on the left shows the top 10 centimeters of soil moisture, so more that surface soil moisture. And then the right map shows the top meter, so that more close to the total column. And these color scales are also lining up with the Drought Monitor categories. So the yellow would be D0, the peach is D1, all the way to a maroon, which is D4. And so on the map on the left, we are seeing conditions that are a little bit closer to normal, with some of that dryness popping up in the Eastern Plains. And then when we look at the map on the right, we see that total column soil moisture is showing up quite dry for most of the Eastern Plains, with a lot of dry spots popping up throughout the rest of the state. And this is going to be an important reminder for what will be coming in the spring and the summer, because this dry soil moisture is really could play an important role in terms of our temperature and precipitation anomalies as we go into the summer for the Eastern Plains. This is a look at EDDI, which is the Evaporative Demand Drought Index. So the map on the left is for 1 month, so going back to mid-February, and then the map on the right is the 3-month, which goes back to mid-December. And this is a product that combines temperature, solar radiation, wind, and humidity, and it takes those and compares to the historical record for that time period, and then ranks it. And then again, you can see that those warm colors are lined up with the Drought Monitor colors. So while we don't really talk about evaporative demand in the winter because our vegetation is dormant, I think that this product can give us a general idea of the relative health of the ground. And so when we started the water year and we went into a very warm and dry November and December, the map was lighting up with the oranges and reds and maroons. And since then, it has started transitioning to those bluer colors like you see on the map on the left. On the map on the right, with that 3-month extending back into that mid-December time period, you can see some of those higher stress values across the Eastern Plains and even into the mountains. And I really think that's an indication of how strongly anomalous it was in December to still have the memory of that in the 3-month eddy on that map on the right. But since then, things have really settled down. So I'm going to shift and talk about drought. First look is the national drought picture. And aside from areas in the Midwest and into the Great Lakes region Northeast, where there's not really any drought, a lot of the country is covered in drought, and Colorado is no exception. So zooming into Colorado, we see that this is where the map updated to last Thursday. And we have had precipitation since then. So you can expect to see some changes to the map this week, especially when we're talking about areas in around the Northern Front Range and the plains, northeastern Colorado, where we could see some improvement where we've seen most of the precipitation. We have had some precipitation in the southeastern part of the state, but I'm not sure if it's enough to warrant improvement. And it's been extremely dry there, which is why you see that D3 category, and a little bit quieter in the southwestern part of the state, and probably no changes to the western part of the state where we are now on this map. Interesting statistic I found is that we have had D3 or D4 drought somewhere in our state for the last 97 weeks in a row. So I say we throw a Debbie Downer party in 3 weeks when we hit 100 consecutive weeks. It seems like a significant milestone, even if we don't want it. All right, let's look forward now. This map shows what precipitation we can expect over the next week. It's going to be a little bit drier than the activity that we've had over the past couple of weeks. So most of the Eastern Plains, we're not really expecting anything. On the western side of the state, a little bit of moisture. The light green and medium green only goes to like 1/10 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch. So not a lot that we're talking about. And so when you look at the map on the lower right, that shows it as an anomaly. So even though we're seeing some precipitation in the state, it's pretty much going to be drier than average for the entire state and really the entire region. And we also know we're going to get some warmer temperatures with that. And as we extend into the 8 to 14 day outlook, then we're looking at temperatures maybe getting a little bit closer to normal for this time period, with a slight leaning to warmer than normal for some of the Eastern Plains. The precipitation outlook for the end of March and into April is leaning to above average precipitation, especially for the northern part of our state. So we can hope that that pans out. This is the seasonal outlook. And these are really quite remarkable. So let me break it down first, looking at the temperature outlook on the left side. This map was released last week, and it's for the April, May, June time period. And where you see the warm colors is that the Climate Prediction Center expects there to be warmer than average conditions for the next 3 months. So all of Colorado is covered in that. Only a small portion of the country is expecting cooler than average temperatures. The map on the right is for precipitation for the April, May, June time period. And where you see the browns, the Climate Prediction Center is expecting more likely drier than average conditions, which cover Colorado. Now, what makes these so significant is the level of confidence that they are seeing when they make this prediction. Usually when we're talking seasonal outlooks, we don't get into these high categories that you see. So after that equal chances on the map on the left, you will see that light orange and going into the darker orange. You know, that is leaning, that's a slight leaning to warmer than average. But once we get towards the reds, that is a lot of confidence to say that they really have high confidence that the southern states there and into southern Colorado are going to be warmer than average. And similarly speaking with the precipitation outlook, those brown circles that say below on them are showing a high likelihood of below average precipitation. And there's a bullseye there on both, really highlighting the southern plains. And this is an area that is currently in drought and has those dry soils. And that is going to possibly be a big player in these maps panning out to being warmer than average and drier than average. How about the El Nino forecast? So right now we are still in a La Nina. It's been a weakening La Nina, and it is forecasted to continue weakening. On the left here is the bar chart showing the probability of La Nina as a blue, the probability of neutral conditions as the gray, and then the probability of El Nino as the red. So in that March, April, May time period, we obviously likely stay in that La Nina. Sorry. And as that La Nina weakens, the probability of neutral conditions increases. But interestingly enough, this forecast has changed over the past couple of months, and there is a higher likelihood now that the La Nina sticks around through the summer. And so now it's getting closer to a 50-50 shot whether we will keep that La Nina or whether it transitions to neutral conditions in the summer. So what does La Nina mean for the spring and into the summer? These are the climate risk of extremes during a La Nina. On the left is for the March, April, May time period, and the right is the June, July, August time period. So we got the spring on the left, summer on the right. What risk of wet or dry extremes is expected when you are in a La Nina pattern? And there's not a lot of clear patterns popping up for Colorado specifically, but I kind of circled the region to show that in that spring, we see a little bit of that drier pattern popping up in the southern states and extending around Colorado, meaning that it's more likely we would be at a risk for dry extremes rather than wet extremes, with the exception of possibly the northern mountains. Into the summertime period, now the risk of dry extremes extends to the north and the northern plains. And so that is something that could also have an impact on Colorado based on our location, that we could still be at risk for those dry extremes. Now, interestingly enough, you will see that Arizona is at an increased risk for wet extremes during the La Nina, which means that the La Nina could help the monsoon pattern, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it will extend beyond the Four Corners and up into Colorado. So, but one of the biggest reminders that I want to say is that it's kind of hard to attribute really specific patterns from ENSO to our summer pattern, and local features are more likely to play a role. So what is more likely to impact our summer pattern? I look at three things right now that are going to drive what we might see in the summer. The upper left is our warming climate. Statewide average temperatures for June, July, August have been warming. We have seen that very consistently in the summer temperatures especially in very recent years. In terms of precipitation, there is a lot of variability, but more recently, we've tended to see a little bit of a drier pattern, even with the recent, even with last year's monsoon performing a little bit better. More often than not in our recent years, the monsoon has not been able to provide us with relief. And one of the biggest players, I think, is something we need to keep in mind is where our soil moisture conditions are at right now. So this is a different soil moisture product than the one I showed. This is using a satellite-based product to look at the soil moisture across the country, and where you see those reds in the southern plains and into our eastern plains is going to be a big deal for our summer. Where you see those drier soils over the mountains, if that's the way that our soil is really looking for the mountains, we don't see agreement in all the models, but if that is really what we have, then that's going to play a role when we talk about our snowpack melting and transitioning to water supply. So I think that these soil moisture conditions right now are going to be the biggest concern that we face as we go into the later spring and summertime period. That is all I have. You can get our presentation and other presentations on our website, and I can take any questions that you may have.
Thanks, Becky. That was awesome. Are there questions for Becky before we move on?
I have one, Megan.
Sure.
Becky, you know, for us veggie farmers, what's really important is the last date for frost in the spring and the killing frost in the fall. You know, the averages for average temperature have increased, but have those dates at all changed?
Not significantly.
Yeah.
There are some areas where we've seen a slight trend towards the last frost possibly being earlier, and then the fall's first frost possibly being later, but there is so much variability. It's wonderful to be able to say, like, you have no idea. We know that the climate is getting warmer overall, but yeah, those key thresholds are kind of all over the place. And so you can still have them, you can still have a very late freeze at the start of the growing season, and you can still get that risk of a very early freeze at the end of the growing season. And it's unfortunate that we don't have clear indicators on that.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Robert.
Thanks, Becky.
Thank you.
So is there someone from NRCS on? Because I am not seeing.
Yeah, sorry. My name's Joel
Oh.
Atwood. I'm
Hi.
new, so I'm going to be presenting today for the Colorado Snow Survey.
Hi, Joel. Sorry, I didn't know that in advance, but thanks for being prepared. Do you have slides for us today?
I do. Yeah, sorry. It's my first time
me,
using this.
Oh, good. Let me make you a co-host real quick. All right, you should be able to share your screen now. Great.
You see that?
Sure do.
Perfect. So my name is Joel Atwood. I'm a hydrologist for the Colorado Snow Survey, and I will be presenting today in lieu of Carl and Brian, who usually present. So just a little update. I think Brian touched on this on the last meeting. we are going through a major web transition. So many of the products that we have in the past displayed on our websites have changed. We're working kind of to rebuild some of the products that have gone away and replacing, maintaining the old products through different means. Fortunately, this change isn't over. There's going to be another change on October 1st, and probably still working out the scope of these changes. They're big server. In the meantime, the IMAP and the report will still remain available. The web service SOAP API is still available to pull data, and we are going to do our best to try to keep products on our web pages. But if you have questions or comments, or you can't find something, please reach out to us.
One
Try to
moment, I'm
get
going to pause
through
you.
this transition.
We're having
Yep.
some issues with your audio. It sounds like there might be a few people. You're sounding pretty choppy. I'm not sure if that's happened before. Is anyone else having that issue, or is it?
Yeah, I'm hearing it too.
Okay. We can, okay. So we can, it sounds a little choppy. We can try and move forward, but we might perhaps need you to
Can you
call.
hear me now better? Is it still not choppy?
There's a little like delay is what it sounds like maybe, but why don't you go for it if it gets really bad, or just like we can't hear you at all, I'll stop you again and we'll see what we can do.
Okay.
Okay, it sounds pretty bad.
So this is the Colorado statewide summary with our major basins. Statewide, we're
Joel, could we try to have you call in? I know that's a pain. It's pretty choppy for everyone.
okay.
Sorry. Let me see if I can. Alternatively, you can send me your slides and I can try and roll through them if it's a bandwidth issue.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Try to call it.
Hey, Megan, while we're waiting on that, is there ever going to be a plan to go back to in-person meetings for WAP?
That's a great question. I think we could kind of take a poll. We've always had a hybrid option. There's always been call-in in person. I think Megan O'Grady is on the phone right now, so I can put that on her radar to discuss when or if that would happen. That transition seems to be happening pretty slowly for CWCB, so I'm not sure how soon that would happen, but the answer is I don't know. Is that a preference for you?
You know, it's nice to occasionally have the option to, see people in person, and, it limits the technical glitches that may pop up for the presenters. But if it stayed remote like this, that would be fine too.
Okay. Megan O'Grady, I might see if you can raise that question.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. We could certainly send out a survey. Maybe it's like in person quarterly, otherwise virtual or something like that. I mean, every few meetings in person and then otherwise virtual.
Okay, can you hear me
Okay,
better?
can you hear me better?
Maybe keep talking.
Yeah, you hear me now?
Yeah, you sound clear at
Um,
the moment.
I sound what?
You were sounding good. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. My screen still shared.
It's not. There you go. Thanks for making that change, Joel. That's
Yeah, no problem. Sorry about that. This is my
a lot
first
better.
time doing this.
Yeah.
All right, so statewide, the snowpack is approximately normal at 99%. We are 18 days out from the peak, the typical median peak snowpack. We're about at the 40th percentile, so doing pretty okay for the snowpack. Precipitation is more of the same, 99% of median. 18 days out from the typical peak this is snowpack too. Yeah, this is just a comparison of several years. So we have this year's approximately normal so far compared to last year. We're a little bit above what we were at last year, and then 2011 was a really big water year. We're well below that in 2011, and then we're well above in 2002, which is the low time series. This is a map just showing the major basins in Colorado statewide. We're 99% of median. Some of the western basins have, especially the southwestern basins, are above median, where more of the eastern basins are at median, and that's mostly due to the early season storms we received, which really pounded, especially the Gunnison area and the San Juan area. And there's still quite a bit of snow up there from those storms. Statewide precipitation, we're about normal at 99%. We're well above what we were last year, but still below what we were in that big water year in 2011. This month we're doing pretty well. We've received quite a bit of storms that have for the month to date precipitation. We're 119% of median, and the water year to date, as already mentioned, we're 99% of median. So hopefully this trend continues, and we have a pretty good month for precipitation. Now the stream flow forecasts are all much lower than sort of the optimistic outlook of the snowpack and the precipitation. And this is due to just those dry and soil conditions. And this is just the gray space shallow groundwater drought indicator, and this is kind of starting the water year in last October. As you can see, a lot of Colorado is pretty darn dry. And in January, after we had that big snowpack delivery, a lot of the soils did improve a bit, but closer to today, that improvement has largely gone away, and we're kind of back to being pretty dry. This can also be seen in sort of the early season precipitation. So for water year 2020, this is June 1st to December 31st, and we did all right just due to the monsoon that we got in this, especially in the western part of the states during the summer. But if we go back last year, water year 2021, the same time period was really extremely dry, especially in the west. And then going back another year, again, really dry. And so this year, despite getting a big monsoon push, temperatures are pretty warm. So those likely dried out the soils in many areas. And then, so the reservoirs statewide are below median,
And especially in the western part of the state, a lot of those reservoirs are down. A lot of that is actually due to shipping water downstream to Arizona's reservoirs to deal with the drought in that area. As you can see, that pattern is pretty stark. Western slopes, the reservoirs are below median, where eastern slopes were above median. And this is just another graph showing the departure from median for the statewide reservoir totals. And as you can see on the very right, we're pretty far below that median, mostly driven by those the reservoirs in the western slope. Now we're going to go through the major basin summary, starting with the Yampa White North Platte River basins. The Yampa White Little Snake River Basin is below normal right now for snowpack, 91% of median. We're below we're 79% of the median peak, so that's the median of the peaks, the peak snowpack for the last 30 years. And we're sitting at the 28th percentile, so not looking super great for Yampa White Little Snake. Precipitation, on the other hand, is more or less near normal at 97% of median. We're doing better than we did, much better than we did last year, water year 2021, by that blue line below the black line, which was an exceptionally dry year. But we're nowhere near what this basin received in 2011, which is that blue line above the black line. For Laramie and North Platte, the snow conditions are a little bit better. We're almost at normal with 97% of median. So hopefully snow keeps arriving in that basin to keep that on track. Precipitation is near median at 97%, which is pretty good. Compared to the last 2 years, 2021 and 2020, we're kind of sitting right in between those, so we're tracking pretty well. Laramie and North Platte. This is a nice graph showing the forecast and sort of the uncertainty. The bolded black numbers is the 50% exceedance volume, so that's sort of the average of the forecasted distribution. Right now, in the Yampa White North Platte River basins, there's a pretty large spread, which shows you that there's a lot of still uncertainty in the forecast. So this is the March 1st forecast. And outside of the Yampa or the North Platte River and Laramie River, a lot of the river basins have a 50% exceedance volume of less than median. That's due to some of those lower snow totals, especially in the Yampa White area, and drier soil conditions. Colorado River Basin, doing pretty well, 102% of median, 86% of median peak for the water year. And we still have 23 days to go, so hopefully the storms keep coming and we keep building the snowpack there. We're 47th percentile right now, so not too bad. Precipitation also right around median, 98%. We're already at 51% of the total water year precipitation basin, so doing pretty well. Colorado. Despite the near normal precipitation snowpack, we're still looking at below normal 50% exceedance value stream flow volumes. Again, likely due to soil conditions. This is a nice graph showing this year's soil conditions. So our snow sites, we've been installing a lot of soil sensors to try to get a better picture of what the soils are doing. And so this is an average of the soil sensors in the Colorado mountain soil saturation. We are below normal pretty significantly, so that is contributing to those lower stream flow exceedance volumes of the forecast. South Platte River Basin, again, like many of the other major basins, near normal of 98% snowpack, 73% of the median peak. So again, hopefully storms keep coming so that we can stay near normal. Precipitation, 100% of median, same story here. We're doing better than we did last year at this time. So hopefully we just keep that moisture coming to the state. In the South Platte, the reservoir story is much different than in the West, where there's many reservoirs are much below a median here. Most reservoirs are right around median or even above median with a few exceptions. The Gunnison, due to those southern storms that we had in late December, early January, the Gunnison really received substantial snowpack that is still sort of dominating the trend. So the percent of median in the Gunnison is 111%, largely driven by the Elk Mountains, the large snowpacks we have in the Elks. We're 87% of the median peak, so let's hope that the snow keeps falling. Precipitation, same story. We're above median, 101%, doing much better than we did in the previous 2 years, in 2021 and 2020 water years. So hopefully we just keep receiving those big precipitation gains. So as you can see, the pink is the median storage for these reservoirs. Blue is the current conditions, and the Blue Mesa especially is less than 50% of median value. So a lot of that water was actually shipped downstream. So these basins are well below median as far as the reservoir storage goes. Again, the forecasts are kind of hit and miss here. Draining basins, especially from the Elks to the Grand Mesa, with that substantial snowpack we received in December and January, they're looking pretty good with exceedance values, 50% exceedance values greater than 50% of median. There's still some uncertainty, especially in stream flows draining the San Juans. There's pretty big spread. So that uncertainty hopefully will improve as we get closer to peak water year. But those basins are all mostly expected to be below median 50% exceedance volumes. That's also driven by the low soil moisture. So here you can see the blue line is 2021, and there was the last summer, despite the monsoon, the big monsoon, the soil moisture really was zapped out of the soil just by the heat in the mountains. So we started off this year, this water year, really extremely low in soil moisture. And so that is driving some of these lower forecasts despite the more optimistic snowpack and precipitation.
Joel? Joel, hi. Sorry, this is Tracy. Could you go back to that last slide? It seems like maybe this is a good time to get clarification. There was a question in the chat about what's the soil moisture product that NRCS is using in stream flow forecast products?
So right now we're not using soil moisture to generate specifically in the Viper model, which is the model we've used to forecast stream flow. Instead, we've been relying on sort of early season precipitation as a proxy for soil moisture, but this is a future direction of the snow survey program, is to use soil moisture in these models. We found just some preliminary tests. There's been some really encouraging results by including soil moisture. So we're working as an entire program to kind of ramp up our soil moisture and build more soil moisture products to get at sort of what the near surface soil conditions are in the mountains.
Tracy, do you mind if I expand on my question there?
No, yeah, please.
Yeah.
So yeah, Joel, I was asking if you were using Grace, since you showed the Grace model, and Grace has showed things significantly worse than some other models, but now you're showing products that were made using your own observations, right, of those soil sensors that go from 2 to 20 inches deep. You don't have that many of those with a long record in Colorado, do you? I mean, looking at the Gunnison Basin, it's probably only a handful.
Yeah, so right now you can see actually on this graph specifically, there's 8 sites right now that data is being pulled from. So like we're working on building these networks, but I think it's for some of these basins where we have more of the soil stacks in them, it can be a good indicator. Just collaborating sort of those other, like the Grace product you were talking about. It helps with that story, and we're every year we've been installing more and more, so we're hoping to really ramp this up.
Okay, I may have to follow up with you about this offline, because I've looked at this as well and have been somewhat discouraged with the amount of predictive skill I've been able to derive from soil moisture models and observations prior to peak snowpack conditions. So maybe you're just doing something a little bit different, but I've found that the predictive skill that you can't get from peak snowpack, more of it has tended to be what happens in the spring afterwards, like what we saw in 2015 or 1995 with, say, those miracle Mays, or if we look at the last couple of years, sure, we've had bad antecedent conditions, but we've also had really dry springs, so that's helped explain it. But I can definitely follow up with you later about this.
Yeah, definitely follow up. From the preliminary tests that I believe the Water and Climate Center have done, we're with our new M4 model, and they've been our soil moisture. We're just starting to start to edit it, but the Utah DCO has done a good job of editing all the way back, editing a nice period of record essentially, and so that I believe is where they were applying soil moisture, and because of the encouraging results there, I believe that is where that is sort of where the direction of the program is going now. Like the Miracle May and stuff, I feel like the Front Range is a little bit, it's tricky because we get those sort of anomalous, low pressures that pass to the south and will sometimes drag up moisture and can really leave those forecasts pretty uncertain, especially in the late spring. So maybe
yeah, May 2015, that really hit our whole state, but I agree that it's more of an issue on the Front Range. But that makes sense that you're doing the tests in Utah, because there you've got the SCAN network, you've got way more SNOTEL soil moisture sites, and they were kind of ahead of the game in terms of installing these stations. And I'm not saying installing these stations is not worth doing. It's definitely worth doing. It just takes time for the data to really mature and become useful for things like this. So I'm curious how it's going to translate to Colorado.
Yeah, and that's still an open question, and we're like, that's why the results were encouraging enough in Utah that we're really trying. It's a huge push to really install these stacks, and I do think, as originally a soil scientist, I do think there's a lot of data or a lot of good information you can get from soil moisture. So I'm hoping that this trend of installing more and more soil moistures will keep going.
All right, I'm sorry, everyone. I've stopped you for way too long, but good stuff.
No problem. So let's move on to the San Miguel, Dolores, Animus, and San Juan River basins. So again,
sort of similar to the Gunnison. The snowpack is 104% of median, so that's pretty good. Precipitation, not as good, 93% of median. Which is mostly due to the late fall. We really didn't receive a lot of precipitation the late fall like much of the state. Reservoir storage, again, the Navajo Reservoir is the big outlier where it comes to. It's very much below median, and it's kind of driving the basin average for below median reservoir storage. Again, forecasts here are all below 50% exceedance due to those soil moisture conditions. This basin has been really dry, especially in the summer for the last few years, despite the big monsoon we had last year. It's just this pretty historic drought that we just haven't recovered from. Upper Rio Grande, about near normal snowpacks, are doing pretty well. But it's really, the Upper Rio Grande story is really a tale of two mountain ranges. The southern Sangres have just not received a lot of snowpack. As you can see, a lot of snow-tell sites kind of going into New Mexico are all below 80% of median right now, where basins or snow-tell sites in the San Juans are all roughly around 100% of median. So it's kind of like two sides of the basin. One side, pretty okay as far as snowpack. The other side's precipitation. The other side's more getting below normal, especially in the south. And this is a radar plot of the reservoir conditions in the Upper Rio Grande. I think it's useful to kind of see the variability. So like the Sanchez right now is well below median, where the Rio Grande Reservoir is slightly above median. So it kind of comes out in the wash, where the Upper Rio Grande is only slightly below median, just because there's a lot of variability there. And like I said, that's a lot to do with the fact that one side of the basin is much drier compared to the other side. And you also see that sort of play out in the forecasts, where forecasts draining from the west are slightly better than the exceptionally low forecasts draining from the southeast of the basin. So like the Chinchilla Creek is exceptionally dry right now. Even the uncertainty puts it all below percent of median stream flow volumes. So yeah, it just shows that this is really hit or miss in the Rio Grande, depending on what side of the basin the rivers are draining from. Arkansas River Basin, sort of a similar story, where you have the upper basin is doing okay, where the southern basin is much below normal as far as precipitation and snowpack. So the average of the entire basin is 94% of median, so below the median. Precipitation is actually doing all right. It's 100% of median right now. Compared to the last 2 years, it's actually about the same as last year at this time and in 2020 at this time. So that's pretty interesting. A big spread on the stream flow forecasts. The farther north you go in general, the better the water flow or the stream flow volume outlook. Where draining the southern mountains, stream flow outlook's pretty bleak right now. And just we only have 5 sites right now that have soil moistures in the Arkansas. So take this with a grain of salt, but those soil moistures are all showing
definitely very dry conditions. So that's especially apparent in the southern Sangres. So in summary, much of the state has near normal snowpack and precipitation. Statewide reservoirs, 75% of median, and that's largely driven by the very low percentages west of the Continental Divide. Antecedent soil moisture conditions in several basins are still in deficits due to the long-term drought. Streamflow forecasts for much of the state are expected to be below normal for the spring and summer, and many streamflow forecasts remain fairly uncertain. Are there any questions?
I have a quick question. This is Megan. I'm curious if you could point us to the links of those spiderweb graphs or charts that you showed for reservoir storage.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Is there sorry, I'm not good at Teams.
Say it again.
Is there a chat to put this in? Oh, there we go.
And then Joel, I'm going to shoot you a link that where you could drop your presentation so that we can get it up on the CWSB website with this information.
Perfect.
I had a question too, Joel. Were you saying that streamflow forecasts are uncertain because we still have more of the snow accumulation season, or would you say there's other reasons as well?
It's a little bit of both. So the snow accumulation, you know, we haven't reached peak. So typically before peak, you're still going to have a lot of uncertainty. And then some of our basins in Colorado, especially like we alluded to earlier, like east of the divide, you can get sort of these anomalous later season springtime storms that really throw off your regression. And so it just leaves a lot more uncertainty, especially east of the divide. So there's a couple factors there, but definitely because we're not sort of in April yet and over peak sweep, the forecasts are just going to be inherently more uncertain.
Yeah, and Tracy, I would even add to that in places like the South Platte Basin and even the Arkansas Basin and some of our northern basins west of the divide, wet conditions in May are not particularly anomalous. You know, for the northern Front Range, May is part of the wettest time of year, and that is after peak snowpack season for most of these snowtail sites because it gets late enough in the year that we have these longer days and higher sun angles. So you see that snow starts to melt, but you can still get other snow events or rain on top of that. And if you're just using peak snowpack to forecast your runoff, you're going to miss those events that happen after.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, and there's so many facts, like the snowpack temperature itself. So in Colorado, and sort of in the past, the snow temperatures were colder, so it would take more energy to like heat those up. Where now they're warmer, so the correlation with the past is less. So there's just inherently more uncertainty as climate sort of changes. Yeah, so there's a lot of things that can drive that.
Okay, any other questions for Joel or others on this call? All right. I'm gonna stop sharing of that screen. I'm not sure. There we go. And we can move into the part of the agenda where we walk through water providers' current status, any concerns or questions for the good of the group. Let me get a list up here. There are also some names that I don't know, so please feel free to identify yourselves if I miss you. But I'm just gonna start at the top here and see, I think is it Andrew Rebart? Or Adrian, would you like to share anything?
Oh, I'm sorry. What did you ask?
That's okay. Can you remind me who you're with?
I'm with the Bureau of Land Management, Gunnison
Oh,
Field
BLM.
Office.
Okay. I thought you were associated with the water provider, so you're good.
No.
Brian Fitzpatrick, do you want to start us off?
Sure. City of Aurora. Our demand pattern over the winter has been pretty consistent. We're right about average for customer usage. Although our storage overall in our system is down about 5%. We're not alarmed yet, but we are keeping an eye on our storage.
Thank you. Let's see. What about, I don't know if Chuck Warner or Karen Johnson, do you have anything? Or Chuck Wayner, sorry.
This is Karen Johnson. I don't have anything. Thank
Okay.
you.
Mm-hmm. Can go to John Orr.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Storage is sitting at around 23,361 acre feet, which is about 65% of capacity. We drew down one of our large storage vessels for a project this winter, and we expect to be able to fill. And production year to date is 1.33% above last year at this time. And that's my report.
All right, what about Joel?
Schneekloth?
Yes, please go ahead. All right, there's multiple of you, yes.
Yeah. Well, it's been a nice wet week and a half, depending upon where you're at in the Eastern Plains. Last week, right in the Akron area and north, we had, roughly about an inch worth of moisture between rain and wet, sloppy snow. Yesterday's storm, which was supposed to hit our area hard again, went south of us, and I was just looking at the conditions, and Kit Carson had 1 3/4 inch moisture, so nice event. Still early in the agricultural year, but we are noticing people talking about the wheat that was dusted in last fall that didn't germinate, sat in the ground. It actually is sprouting, so if we keep the moisture up, there is hope for a wheat crop. Summer crops, question it, we have for moisture and what to really do with all the crazy amount of inputs and costs. Most inputs have tripled in price this year for fertilizer and that. So it is going to be a crazy year.
Thanks. All right, crazy year. I thought we were done with those, but here we are. What about Jordan? Would you like to share an update?
Yeah, definitely. So Denver Water's reservoirs are about 80% full right now, and normal for this time of year is 79% full. We're looking at our South Platte snowpack is 81% of normal, and snowpack for our Colorado River Basin watershed is 93% of normal. So far, average demand for March is about 99 million gallons per day, and expected daily use for this month is 102 million gallons per day.
Great, thank you. What about Justin with Colorado Springs? Are you there?
Looks like
We're
it's
not.
trying.
Yeah, I can tell you're unmuted, Justin. We can't hear you if you're talking. We'll move on and see if that can get sorted. What else do we have? Swithin, would you like to go for Highlands Ranch?
Sure. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Sounds good.
All righty. Reservoir storage, we are probably 20-25% lower than our long-term average. That's kind of a reflection of the dry past 2 years and drying that storage down. At least things are looking good for water supplies so far for 2022. And we do have good soil moisture, at least for turf. So not expecting a huge demand coming into early spring, which is always a relief. Kind of a wait and see attitude right now, but I'm expecting we'll probably use 50% more groundwater than we do typically in this year to make up for that shortfall in surface storage. But overall, I'm pretty optimistic right now for winter 2022. And that's about it.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just going to go free for all who has not shared. I've got some messages. Adrian, would you like to share some of that information in the group? You're welcome to.
Oh, it's Andrew. But yeah, we were installing some groundwater equipment for USGS near Crested Butte in the East River watershed near Skyland, and we had to dig 4 feet down to reach the well. And when I was digging in there, I found a dust layer about 45 inches above the ground. So I, shared that information with the Center for Snow and Avalanche Studies. And I think they just did their kind of tour of Colorado, looking at dust layers. We do have dust here in the Gunnison River Basin, Upper River Gunnison Basin.
Okay, thank you. It's helpful. Anyone else on the participant list would feel free to unmute yourself and share an update from your corner or lens. Adrian, did you want to share something or?
Oh, no, I was just saying the group, we also have a pretty prominent dust layer. It seems to be widespread across the northern San Juans that came in at the beginning of the earlier February storm cycle. So we're sort of watching that and waiting for it to reemerge. Basically, it keeps emerging between storms as things melt out.
Okay, thank you. All right. Anyone else like to chime in? Conditions, observations, relevant updates, non-relevant updates. Tracy, do you have anything else? Or are you?
I think the only thing I'd add is that I know I've mentioned a couple of times that we were behind on producing our surface water supply index product, which is just another metric. I know we have so many, but it's another metric that combines reservoir storage and stream flow forecast at this time of year. But I want to give a thank you to my colleague Elise, who's on the call, who's gotten us caught back up. And so our mapping program and our drought webpage at GWR have been updated so folks can check out that product as well. And, you know, it's like a lot of what we saw today, even though we have snowpack is looking decent across much of the state, the stream flow forecast and reservoir storage are resulting in surface water supply index that is below the median. So I'll just mention that.
Megan,
Go ahead.
this is Swithin. I was just, okay, I'll admit I've lost track, but looking at the eastern side of Colorado, I was wondering, do we still have the agricultural task force activated?
Yes, that's a great question. So the Agricultural Impact Task Force that's been activated since summer 2020 is still active. They have switched, they have just agreed in the last month to switch to a quarterly schedule and to add in meetings as necessary depending on what direction we go. That group was previously meeting every month, and we're in more of this long-term stasis. So that Ag Group and the Municipal Impact Task Force have both switched to quarterly meetings. I do have a call with the director level group that monitors drought for the state this afternoon. And so we'll discuss whether we remain in activation and kind of the recommendations there. It's likely we will keep those groups active and you know, those participants engaged, but really meet more as needed rather than the very regular initial meetings that we had. So we want to just make sure that there's open line of communication there, but not fully dissolve those groups at all.
Okay. And is it just those two task force impact groups that are active at this time?
Yes, those two, and then what we call the Drought Task Force, which are the directors of state departments.
All righty, thank you.
You're welcome. And if you need to get in touch with anyone on those on that task force, you can reach out to Megan O'Grady moving forward, and she'll be managing those task forces. Megan, if you want to paste your email in the chat there, just so folks know, you'll be, as a reminder, if you weren't on calls before, Megan has been hired to replace my role and will be managing drought response for the state moving forward. Thanks there. Great, anything else? All right, I will let us move on with our days. Thank you so much for those presentations and the conversation, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.